The Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, has decided to throw the contentious issue of climate policy over to the people, announcing she'll set up a citizens' assembly of 150 Australians from all walks of life to try to get community consensus. In a keynote speech in Brisbane today, she maintained there'd be no action on a carbon price until at least 2012, and also promised to invest $1 billion so power generated from renewable sources could easily be connected to the national grid. Political editor Heather Hewitt reports.
Coal and oil have got to go, hey hey, ho ho. Coal and oil have got to go, hey hey, ho ho.
It wasn't quite the welcome Julia Gillard might have hoped for as she attempted to offer her solution to climate policy, or lack of it.
Hey, Julia, something must be done.
She may well be ruining her choice of venue at the University of Queensland for one of the key speeches of her campaign, aimed at silencing critics over the dumped ETS.
Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Fossil fuels have got to go! Hey!
One protester was arrested midway through the speech. But the show went on, as the Prime Minister borrowed the time-honoured tradition of one of her predecessors, Bob Hawke.
We need consensus among political parties, but we need consensus in the community even more.
And here came the punchline as she declared that ordinary Australians, whoever they are, would be brought into the process.
And so today I announce that if we are re-elected, I will deliver a dedicated process, a citizens' assembly, to examine over 12 months the evidence on climate change, the case for action and the possible consequences of introducing a market-based approach to limiting and reducing carbon emissions.
Julia Gillard has bought herself time on an issue that had to be addressed somehow in this campaign, since she'd ruled out action on a carbon price until at least 2012. Her opponents, though, say they can see through the strategy.
Let me be very clear. This is camouflage for the coming climate tax.
How do you randomly select people? What, I just walk along the street, tap people on the shoulder and say, congratulations, you won a prize, you to determine our climate policy?
If she wants 150 people to talk about climate change, she's going to have that in the House of Representatives after this election.
The Prime Minister insists she'll lead the debate and will act when the economy and the community are ready. Who knows when that might be? Julia Gillard was a leading member of the Gang of Four who scrapped the ETS in the first place and is acutely aware of the backlash that created.
The lesson I've learned from that is that we need more than a fragile political consensus to deal with such a transformation to the way we live and work. This is about the Australian people, and it would be dreadful for the nation, dreadful for business certainty, dreadful for our outlook if this all became hostage to the swings and roundabouts of the political cycle.
Her speech today appears to have appeased the business community, but not leading environmental groups.
I'm really worried that today's announcement means we're tracking too slowly on this important issue. It is good the Prime Minister's going to lead a debate, but the majority of Australians do support action right now.
Whilst there are some differences of approach between the two parties, what they are both essentially now saying is that Australia needs to get both the detail and timing right in respect of climate change policy. That's much better than where we were 12 months ago, where we were all running like lemmings towards the edge of a cliff with an emissions trading system before the rest of the world was prepared to do so.
For the federal opposition, this is no time for bipartisanship. For Tony Abbott, there's just one target.
It's high time that the Prime Minister show some real leadership on this, not fudge the issue until after the election. It's not good enough. And as things stand, Julia Gillard looks very much like the man she deposed, Kevin Rudd.
The opposition tries to mention Kevin Rudd on just about any topic that comes up in this campaign, while Labor does its best to pretend the past doesn't exist. But sometimes it can't be avoided. The ABC's new 24-hour news service last night reported that Cabinet and official sources say Kevin Rudd showed a casual disregard on national security matters, that he often turned up late to meetings of Cabinet's National Security Committee and at times allowed his Chief of Staff, Alistair Jordan, to take his place.
I worked alongside Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister, and as Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd was deeply concerned about the security of the Australian people.
Does she still say that he is fit for a senior frontbench position, particularly Foreign Affairs, when it's been revealed that he had such contempt for national security meetings?
I've said to Kevin Rudd, who is running as the member for Griffiths, that after election day, if we are re-elected, then of course I want to see him as a senior member of my front bench team.
I think this is one promise she ought to break.
These issues of whether Kevin sent a bloody staffer or didn't attend these things, I think that's in the past. I don't think it's got anything to do with the future.
Kevin Rudd has issued a statement denying the claims of showing a casual disregard for national security and saying he'd attended all critical meetings. That's not good enough for public service veterans.
Now, if the Prime Minister calls a national security meeting and then is not available for it, there's something very strange going on. The Prime Minister himself says this is the highest duty of government, and yet then we find he's either late or doesn't turn up.
You've been at these sort of meetings.
Yes.
Are you shocked that something like this could go on?
Yes.
How do you think it happened?
Well, I think presumably it goes back to the disorganisation in the processes of government.
There are now much louder rumblings in government ranks that Julia Gillard shouldn't have Kevin Rudd back on the Cabinet team, especially if he's so keen to find a second job at the United Nations.